Good morning, thanks for clicking on the video. Well, you saw the thumbnail. Um, this video are notes to myself about how to hand feed baby birds. I am not good at it. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I happen to have a lot of opportunity this spring. So I wanted to make notes about what I did better and why I think it was successful when I've had troubles in the past. And before I forget, because it'll be at least a year or so, hopefully never, where I'll have to do it again. So, if you're good at feeding baby birds, I doubt there's going to be anything interesting here. If you're not, maybe you have the same troubles that I do. So, who knows? And I should also say, when I say to myself in the video, don't be an idiot, you need to do this, the you is me that I'm talking to. I'm not talking to you. Okay, let's jump right in. So number one, prepare. You don't want to be caught with a tossed chick and not be prepared. Since the manufacturer doesn't say how long the freezer extends the life of the formula, just get some new formula each season. I know, just read them again. Find your baby feeding kit. You probably cannibalized it, so you're going to have to look around. Toothpicks, Q-tips, paper towels, the little dishes for mixing the food and also for the nests. Find the heating pad and test the heating pad and the incubator. The little shelf that you made to separate the baby bird from the water dishes should be in the brooder already. And you might as well make sure you can find the little jig you made for rotating the eggs and the little half teaspoon plastic spoons for holding the eggs. Otherwise, you can see the cutouts, just make a new one. Also, most important, make sure you find syringes. You need like 4 1cc syringes with a little crop feeding tube. Remember that this style where the 2mm tube inserts into the syringe works best for the kind of 4-day-old to, say, 10-day-old chicks. And remember to disassemble the little extensions when you clean the syringe, just to make sure you get everything really cleaned out, even the kind that you insert inside of it. Okay, number 2, practice. You don't need a chick to practice. Just rehearse the basics so that you feel confident and you can do it. You may as well start practicing with the formula. Remember, 1/3 of a cup for 20 seconds in the microwave so you don't cook the formula. By the time you get it over there and get the stuff out of the freezer, it'll be about the right temperature for mixing, not too hot. Mix it up thoroughly. Watch the consistency. And make sure that you test it every single time before you feed it to the chick, so it's about 105 degrees or barely warm. Remember, until you're crop feeding, the feeding process is kind of slow, especially with a toothpick, so keep the formula warm in between each feeding. Otherwise, by the time you're done, it's actually pretty cool. Okay, also remember that the formula thickens as it cools. So if you add a little bit of hot water to it, in between, if you're doing a little half of a syringe and then you're going to do another half, if you do that, it will keep the consistency correct and it will also warm the formula back up. Okay, the other thing is remember you like a little bit different proportions. So if they say 1 to 6 for newly hatched chicks, go ahead and use 1 to 6 if you're using the crop feeder extension, but you don't like that. You like the toothpick better for the very young chicks, and then 1 to 6 doesn't balance on the toothpick, so use 1 to 5 instead. And then by the time they're, say, 5 days old, use 1 to 4 ratio, 4 to 5 days old. And then by the time they're 9 days old, 1 to 3 ratio, let's say 10 days old, 1 to 3 ratio. And then stay with that until they're fully fledged, unless you need to make it more watery because of dehydration. Remember, the dehydrated chicks will get a dark red skin tone and obviously very dried out. This chick is moving in that direction as it had been abandoned for several hours. And although the skin is still pink and not dark red,
with a dark-skinned chick like the one here, it's harder to tell, but you can see the texture of the skin is nice and supple and looks like a grape, not a raisin. Okay, that brings me to practicing with the syringe. Practice sucking it up slowly and make sure you pay attention to where the end is and make enough formula so that you can easily suck up the formula without air. And then practice getting the air out if you do by tapping it and knocking the air to the end and then, ejecting the air before you feed it to the chick. Remember that if the syringe isn't working properly, it's not going to eject the food properly. So watch if if the plunger is getting old or if the formula is too thick. It just doesn't work right, and you'll see it when you suck it up, and then it's not going to get better when it goes back out. So don't use it. Like, figure it out. Okay, just to remember, the little teeny tiny chicks will get about 1/10 of this syringe, or 0.1 cc's, and then when they were almost fully fledged, they were getting like maximum of 2 cc's, 2 syringes. Usually it was more like 1.5. Okay, and then remember to dip the end of the syringe in the hot water just to clean off the stuff on the outside of it, and then there's less goop that gets on the chick. And then that brings me to the actual feeding process, and I don't know if you can practice this without a chick or not, but there are important things to remember in the rhythm and the positioning and the timing and whatnot. Okay, so let's start with crop feeding with the syringe, and then I'll cycle back to using the toothpicks. Okay, when the chicks are super tiny, like day 1 to day 3, and they can't hold up their head very well, it seems to work better just to go ahead and feed them on their back on the heating pad. This is not crop feeding. I'm just using the syringe to deliver the food. It's like using the toothpick, but it's a little faster, and when the formula is pretty watery, sometimes it just works a little bit better because you can get a little bit more food in their mouth with each feeding. Starting around day 4, the chicks can hold up their heads and seems like they prefer to eat with this posture. And again, I'm just sort of delivering the food to the right side of the mouth where the crop is. Same rhythm applies. Yeah, I present the food, wait for the chick to start sort of gulping, and then I deliver the food, and then I stop delivering, and then I pull the syringe back out. Okay, when the chicks get a little older, like 5 days or so, then I start to do crop feeding, and I use the other extension, the little teeny tiny tube. And this time I let them gulp it in, and the end of the feeder is actually in the crop. And then you can kind of inject the food pretty quickly for like a second, and then stop injecting, pull it back out, let them breathe, repeat. Remember, if you hold them in your hands, they're going to get cold. So feed them, put them away, feed them some more. Okay, remember the rhythm is important. You sometimes get this wrong. Present the food, let the chick reach for it. Let them start gulping at the syringe and then start injecting the food. Then stop injecting and pull the plunger out of the crop and let them breathe. Really pay attention because sometimes you start pulling out the syringe and you're still pushing food in, and that's a bad thing. Don't do that.
There you go. Okay. All right, we need more. Hang on.
Okay, so backing up even further with younger chicks, this is where you use the toothpick with a little dollop of goop on it, and you're just gonna kind of present it when they're begging and kind of scrape it off on the bottom beak, I guess I'm gonna say, and then let them gulp it. And it takes a while. Be patient. Sometimes it takes them a while to swallow. Remember, because this takes so long to do, feed maybe like, I don't know, whatever, just 3 or 4 times, put them back in the incubator, let them warm up, bring them back out. Even though they're on the heating pad, your fingers are so cold and they're so squirrely, and it's just, they're exhausted, and just let them rest, and then you can feed them again. They almost always come out and beg again. You can do a couple more, and they get a real good feeding, and then you're done, and you can do it again in an hour or an hour and a half.
Or you want more? No, you're asleep. Okay.
Here's a nice video of a little bit older chick, kind of helping to illustrate the rhythm with a toothpick. So here you present the food, and, well, get them begging. So I'm just going to jostle the chin a little bit. Get them begging. Present the food. You're not putting the food in their crop with a toothpick. You just make it available to them, and I think it probably just touches their tongue or something like that. You barely put it in their mouth, and then they go after it. Now, the only thing about this, and the reason that, even though I like this technique, the only reason I end up crop feeding is, one, it's a little bit faster, and two, you gulp, the chick gulps less air. So if the chick gets a lot of air in the crop, they feel full, and then they will quit eating. They'll stop begging. And when that happens, if you very gently massage the crop, you can actually see the little air bubble. And if they have their mouth open and they're begging, you can work the air bubble back up into the throat, and you can burp them. And you just kind of gently push on it. You'll hear it go, and the crop will deflate. If you can't get rid of the air bubble, then don't worry. Let it dissipate naturally. You just have to feed again a little sooner than you would have otherwise. If you really try to force it, or the crop is too full, you could push food back up into the mouth, and then they could aspirate, so that would be bad. Here's the chick when it's a little bit older. You can see a little air bubble in there. And that's a full crop for a 9-day-old chick, and that's a lot of food to deliver via a toothpick. Okay, so the last thing to remember, I think, is the frequency of the feedings. So every hour, say from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., and then every hour and a half for the during the night, between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. And then that's, say, days 1 through 3. So as much as I do not want to get up at night to feed the chicks, I find that they get too dehydrated. It's probably because the way my incubator works, it blows hot air. Even though I have water in there and I try and maintain the humidity level, I have to feed at night. And then 3 to 5, I think I can go to every hour and a half and every 2 hours at night. And don't forget, if you're going to pick them up, to control the flailing. Your hands are cold. So you better get on with it and feed them quickly before they chill.
I think that's enough for you for now.
And also, don't forget, at this age, look around to make sure that there's no poop on them, and make sure you clean them off with a warm Q-tip dipped in warm water.
Okay.
Okay, by day 6 to 10, can probably get away with every 2 hours and during the day, and every 2.5 hours at night. For the next 5 days, probably feed every 2.5 hours and every 3 hours at night. They say you don't have to feed at night at this age, but again, I find they get very dehydrated. Dehydrated chicks get weak, weak chicks don't beg, and then you start to freak out. So just get up and feed your chicks. But it seems like by day 16 to 20, somewhere in there, you don't have to feed at night anymore. And reduce the feedings to, 2.5 to 3 hours during the day. Just watch the crop, see if it's emptying the way it normally does, or nearly empty, and then feed again. They recommend at some point in the day the crop should actually empty,
You hop forward.
so you don't end up with stagnant food in there.
See if you can do it.
And then, from day 20 to 30, as they're getting independent, I just,
That's right.
just
Good.
kind of
Doing it.
feed them when they're hungry and let them get a little bit hungry and, you know, kind of peck your finger, put like egg food on your finger and that sort of thing, and let them start to feed from the dish, and the stuff that you always do. So don't worry about that part. You've got that. Okay.
Okay, so good. Yeah, that's right. Good.
Okay, then just to remind myself of the setup for the incubator for eggs and chicks. Okay, so I've been setting the temperature to about 95 degrees for the eggs. And then for every 5 days, I drop the temperature about 5 degrees. So when they're 20 days old, it's about 75 degrees in the incubator. And trying to maintain the humidity at about between 50 and 60%, except right before the chicks hatch, and I'm increasing the humidity to about 75%. Remember, you have to rotate the eggs back and forth about 8 times a day during the day. And so use your little jig to do that. And it's helpful to mark the eggs X and O so you know which side is up. And it seems like, or at least with these eggs, remember that you left them in a different position each night. So one night the 0 was up, the next night X is up. I've never read anything that says that's important, but you did that and they all hatched fine. So it might be a good idea. Remember to be gentle when you mark the eggs because you poked a hole in one, remember? What else? It seems like if you put the water on the upper shelf, it blocks the airflow a little bit, especially when you get to the chicks. Eggs, maybe it's not so important, I'm not sure. And use your little temperature sensor to talk to your phone to keep track of the temperature and humidity, but trust the incubator when there's a discrepancy. What else? Okay, the one chick that got stuck, remember you just use the Q-tip to just help advance the crack along just a little tiny bit. Don't pull the shell away from the chick. Let them completely separate from the shell. And you can give them Pedialyte to the outside of their beak with the Q-tip and start feeding them actually, almost as soon as they're begging. It seems like anyway. And that's worked pretty well. And then the setup for the chicks is just to make sure that they can't get to any open water. Use the shelf for that. Put the water on the top level and the chicks in the bottom so the hot air doesn't blow on the chicks quite so much. Okay, so this section is to remind me when the chick isn't begging why they might not be, so I can go through sort of mentally a little checklist about what might not be a problem and what might be a problem and what I can do about it. Okay, the first reason, they're full. Go back to bed. They're fine. Just let them rest. The second reason is they may have air in the crop, so it makes them feel more full than they really are. You can see this chick has a little bit of air in the crop. Not going to worry about it. It'll dissipate, and then I'll just feed it again at the next cycle. Okay, the third reason is the chick is sleepy. Give them a chance to wake up. The fourth reason is they might be chilly. Make sure they are warm, especially if you've had them out and they were eating and then they stopped eating. Make sure they're warm. Okay, another reason, check the temperature of the formula. So the formula is getting colder and colder while it's in the syringe, and they may not be eating because it's cooling them down, or it's cooling, or the food itself is cool. So check that.
Stay there. Don't go anywhere.
Another thing that can happen is if they get weak or dehydrated, then they sort of quit begging or they beg very superficially. If that happens and they won't beg at all, I take my finger and thumb and dip it into warm water or Pedialyte, and I just stroke the seam of the beak gently with wet fingers. And then I pause, and I'll see if they kind of feel the little moisture and if I get any kind of swallowing. And I will just do that, just that, until the chick rehydrates. And that can be, 5 minutes, and then let them rest, and then 10 minutes later I'll do it again, and 10 minutes later I'll do it again, until you see that they start to get a little bit more strength and they start begging again. Okay, so for any other reason, infection or genetic issues or injury or whatever, you don't have an answer for that right now. So just do your best. Okay, this chunk is just to remind me, I'm not always a failure. Sometimes I get it right. Maybe this will help in the future. And for anybody who's interested, what happened with the chicks featured in this video, you can watch the end. This little greenback twin spot, whose name is Sprite, has grown up, become independent, and has learned how to be a bird, and is now living in the aviary as of a couple of days ago. And the eggs that you saw in the little jig were violet-eared waxbill eggs, and 3 of those 4 eggs hatched in the incubator. You saw the chicks growing up, and they were snuck into the nest of another pair of violet-eared waxbills who had infertile eggs, and I faked them out, and they thought their eggs had hatched, and they raised up the 3 chicks who are also living in the aviary now. And I couldn't be more grateful, more appreciative of the birds raising the chicks. I understand fostering. I'm very, very tempted. Yeah. Anyway, it's great to see them happy, healthy, starting to sing, and I hope I will never, ever have to do this again. But if I do, I'm hoping this video will help me do the right things. And if you're still watching, I hope maybe you got something out of this that might help you as well. Thanks for watching.